Here we are, season 15. The season that is the most reviled amongst the Thomas fandom. What do I think? Let's get into it. Thomas and Friends season 15 first aired March 2011 in the UK and between April and June in the US. The series was once again directed by Greg Tiernan and produced by Nicole Stinn of Nitrogen Studios, and Robert Hartshorn reprised his role as composer. Also returning was Michael Brandon for the US narrations and Michael Angeles for the UK dub. Do I think that season 15 is as bad as the entire fandom makes it out to be? And the honest answer is no, I don't. There are some stinkers in here. We are not denying that. But I actually think this was better than season 14. Not a high bar to clear, but I think when we get to good episodes in this season, there are some really good ones. But when we have the bad episodes in here, there are some really bad ones. So as this is another ranking video, I'm just going to get straight into it and rank season 15, all 20 episodes, from worst to best. Once again, these are all my own personal opinions, and I have no doubt your list will be different from mine. It's the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. And let me know in the comments how you would rank season 15 of Thomas and Friends. All I ask is that you be respectful, and above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in. Number 20, Up, Up and Away. Written by Sharon Miller, Thomas and Percy deliver Mr. Bubbles' giant balloon. Oh dear God, this episode was horrible. You've quickly realised that I am not a big fan of Mr. Bubbles, and this episode has Mr. Bubbles with a balloon being delivered on a flatbed to a balloon show by tea time. Every trope about this era that is god awful is wrapped up in this episode and ramped up to 11. It's awful. I actually could not believe how bad this episode was. The Thomas and Percy dynamic is gratingly bad. And also, how the hell could Mr. Bubbles blow up not just one of those giant bubbles, but 4 of the buggers? He's either got lungs of steel or he was on some sort of steroids, man, because there is no way that a guy like Mr. Bubbles could have blown up 4 of those buggers. The only thing that I liked about this episode was when Topham Hat, Lady Hat, and Dowager Hat's hats were all knocked off, and there was one line by Michael Angelis that said, "All of the hats were hatless." The slightest of chuckles, and it might have just been from insanity. Number 19, Fiery Flynn. Written by Sharon Miller, Flynn tries to impress the Diesels with his bravado, with potentially disastrous results. I did warn in the Day of the Diesels review that Flynn's character would certainly be interesting. That is the polite way that I can put it. It's Flynn's only standalone episode in this season, and he's certainly an enthusiastic character. But this is the episode that has the infamous line, "Thomas's firebox was on fire." I'm even fighting back face palming in this review, but I did not fight back the face palm when I watched the episode. It only just narrowly avoided being the worst episode of season 15. It was bad, and Flynn was just, yeah. Number 18, Tree Trouble. Written by Sharon Miller, Diesel, Den, Dart, and Thomas compete to find the best Christmas tree for the Steamworks and the Diesel Works. The Steamies and Diesels are having a heated competition right after Day of the Diesels. Why the hell did Dowager Hat think that this was a good idea? That truce clearly went to after the movie. One thing that I never said about Day of the Diesels that I liked was that there was no rhyming speech in it. I think I counted 1, maybe 2 references of rhyming speech in the movie, but no, the rhyming speech came back with a vengeance in season 15, and the rhyming speech from Thomas in particular in this episode was downright rude. His rhyme was so degrading to the Diesels that it made me root for the Steamies to lose. The only good part was seeing Mavis and Salty at the Diesel Works at the end. The story was very paint by numbers, and it just blended in with all the other holiday episodes in this season. And trust me, there were a lot of them. Number 17, Percy's New Friends. Written by Gerard Foster. After his friends say they are too busy to play, Percy decides to make friends with the animals of Sodor. Before my kids were born, my wife and I hit a baby car boot sale. Trust me, this does link to the story. We found a book version of this story to read to my kids when they were born. I did read this book, but I was so insulted by it that I deliberately chose not to read it to them when they arrived and made the very wise decision to stick with reading the Railway series. And I have to say, the episode it's based on, I didn't think it could be as bad, but it was. I didn't like the story, and I really don't like this episode. When the best part of the episode is seeing a seagull land on Cranky, then you know it's not really got much going for it. I get that the moral of the story is that you need to treat animals with care and respect, be slow and gentle with them because you are big and they are small, but it's just done in the most pandering of ways that it was stretching the limits, even for me. It's just so sad because Percy had one of the best episodes of the previous season, and now he's in one of the worst episodes of this season. Number 16, Wonky Whistle. Written by Neil Benn, Thomas rushes off before his whistle can be properly fixed and scares Farmer McCall's animals. Okay, how many times can we do a wonky whistle premise in Thomas and Friends? Let's try and ignore the fact that Thomas almost kills a workman by just deciding to run away before his whistle is fixed because he's so excited about doing his special job. The rest of the episode was that bad that I just can't get over his stupidity. It's episodes like this that make me realise why the fandom sees season 15 in such a bad light, because these majorly overshadow the few gems that are in this season. Only thing I liked about it was seeing Bertie the Bus. Number 15, Percy the Snowman. Written by Lizzie Enever, Thomas has a special job of taking the Fat Controller to switch on the Christmas lights and wants to share it with Percy, but he only covers his best friend in snow. Okay, right, there's a glaring plot hole here, or an inconsistency. At this point, my brain was mush. Percy keeps getting covered in snow every time that Thomas goes past him, right? But there is no more snowfall at any point during the entire day. So every time Thomas goes past, there shouldn't be more snow that's kicked up to land on Percy. That can only happen if there's been more snowfall and more snow has lay on the rails. It should have been cleared after the first instance, and then the other two strikes shouldn't have happened. So the entire premise of the story, you guessed it, is redundant. This was technically the first time that we saw Flynn since Dave the Diesels, as he was in a cameo at the start of the episode. And in all honesty, after watching his standalone episode, they should have just kept it at that. This episode was a real slog to sit through, and that's not a good thing for holiday episodes. I just really pray that the target audience liked this episode. Number 14, Kevin the Steamy. Written by Laurie Israel and Rachel Rudderman, Kevin practices shunting so that he can take part in Thomas and Percy's game. They got two writers to write this episode, and both of them sucked. They're leaving Kevin in charge of the Steamworks. Of course something is going to go wrong. Something I've noticed with this era, they all seem to have games that have a ish, ash, osh kind of feel to them. Season 13 was Splish, Splash, Splosh. And now season 15, we have Bish, Bash, Bosh. My voice is going higher because I felt like I was going slightly madder than usual. I will give Kevin his due though. When he realised that he had completely messed up, he did knuckle down and show us that he is actually good at his job. I was quite proud of that and a little bit surprised, because all you've saw so far of Kevin in the previous seasons is that he's a complete dumbass. This is just a poor man's attempt at doing Victor Says Yes again. Although, I did like the incidental music that Robert Hartshorn composed for Kevin. Number 13, Surprise, Surprise. Written by Shannon Miller, Thomas tries to hold a Christmas party for Percy, Edward, and Stanley at the Sodor Steamworks, but does not tell Victor. Stanley actually had lines in an episode. He wasn't just a background character for once. That is the main thing that I was clinging on to like this episode. It tried to have a Christmas feel at some points. Thomas tells Charlie to be quiet when he's telling his jokes at the Steamworks, only for Charlie to yell them practically at the top of his lungs, and Victor to instantly catch him and tell him to shoo. Once again, these characters are dumbasses. It's certainly an episode. Number 12, Big Bell. Written by Shannon Miller, Belle's attempts to be friends with Toby only frighten the steam tram away. Okay, the title of Big Belle can be seen as sizist by today's standards. I really hope that Belle does not struggle with the steam engine equivalent of body confidence. It's Belle's first episode since Day of the Diesels, and even though it isn't as bad as Flynn's, it's still not a strong one. It makes Belle seem unintentionally brash and loud and boisterous, and in turn triggers Toby to being old scared Toby that we are now unfortunately familiar with. And it also makes Toby seem a little sexist as well. If Toby didn't like what Belle was doing, his previous character would just tell her to shut her hole. He wouldn't be one to beat about the bush or run away and hide. So again, the character assassination of Toby is pretty prevalent here. I get what they were trying to do, just the execution was a little bit poor. Number 11, Emily and Dash. Written by Sharon Miller, Emily has to escort Dash to a steam fair, but thoughtlessly leaves him behind. There was no thoughtlessly about it. She straight up left the bugger on the main line. There's no thoughtlessly about this. It was the conclusion of the trilogy of episodes that had steam engine and logging local as the premise. And this was the third one and the weakest. I didn't think that we would see the return of bitch Emily, but here she is, back again. But what's even worse is that it's a bitchiness mixed in with fake niceness, which makes her even more of a bitch. I think if you replaced Emily with an engine like Charlie for this season, I think it would have made more sense. But no, it had to be an engine from the Steam team, and once again, Emily got shafted. The thing that really puts this episode above the rest is the cameo of Trevor, the traction engine. He doesn't say anything, he's just there, giving rise to children at the fete. That just filled my heart with joy. We all know that I like my cameos, and it was just so great to see him. Number 10, Gordon and Ferdinand. Written by Sharon Miller, Gordon is embarrassed to be seen with Ferdinand while delivering the line of Sodor. Again, this is another episode where the story itself is pretty redundant. Why would the Duke and Duchess of Boxford want to take the line of Sodor to their summer house for the summer? It makes no sense, aside from driving home the stereotype of if you're rich you can do whatever the you want and you can get away with it. I know that Ferdinand is a unique design of locomotive, but why would everybody be so fascinated about seeing him over Gordon? There's a uniqueness to Ferdinand, but I wouldn't be rushing to see him, especially because all he says is, "That's right," although he said a lot more than that in this episode, which is why it ranks so highly. He actually had a personality. Gordon worrying about him not being the best is very baseline Flanderization of character, but it's still in character, and it was okay. Number 9, Let It Snow. Written by Sharon Miller, while collecting logs for an animal shelter, Thomas sings the Misty Island snow song in the hopes of making it snow for Christmas. Okay, this episode is a little bit childish, and it has the usual tropes of this era. Thomas not doing his job because he's getting distracted by something else. But the Thomas and Gordon dynamic, even in bad eras, always seems to be a good one. And we did get that winter feel, eventually. Number 8, Edward the Hero. Written by Sharon Miller, Edward wants to be a hero like Harold. 8 words for this description. Then again, it is pretty short and sweet. And that's what the episode kind of felt like. I didn't like the Edward worrying character trait coming back. It was very Hit era-esque. But the moral of the story made it for me. It showed you that you don't need to be big, strong, and brave to be a hero. Being yourself is the most heroic thing that you can be. I think if you took the worrying elements out of this episode, it would have been much stronger. Like Edward just did the good deeds on his way to the search and rescue centre, but once he got there, realised, uh-oh, I haven't been the rescue engine. I've not really been that heroic. And then you get the nice resolution at the end. But I love that Harold was in it. I do like how his character is very strong at the start and the end. Well done. Number 7, Toby and Bash. Written by Sharon Miller, Toby tries to find Bash a home on Sodor, but Bash misses his friends on Misty Island. Okay, Toby watching Bash while he's sleeping in his shed is a little bit creepy by today's standards, but Toby and Bash were actually a really good pairing in this episode. Especially Toby, because he was the most in character that he has been in a very long time. Not entirely, because it took him the 3 strikes to figure out what was wrong with Bash. whereas classic era Toby would have clicked to it relatively quickly and tried his best to find the solution that Bash was looking for. It did end with the chorus of "That's right," and the rhyming speech was prevalent, but the story itself was quite a good one. Sometimes the only place where you can feel at home is home. Number 6, Stuck on You. Written by Shannon Miller, Thomas and Butch do not listen to Victor's instructions, so they do not know how to work Butch's new magnet. Remember that story that I told you about getting those books for my kids from a car boot sale? This was another story that was adapted into a book that we had got. But unlike Percy's New Friends, I did enjoy the story, and I actually enjoyed the episode as well, because Rosie had a speaking part and Butch made his debut officially. The musical score is really strong in this. The dialogue isn't completely terrible, and we even got a cameo from Captain, who has been MIA since Missed the Island Rescue. While Thomas still is a massive bell end in this episode, there was still a lot going for it. And I do like how most of the episode was set in the one location of the Sodor Search and Rescue Centre. Number 5, Stop That Bus. Written by Shannon Miller, Thomas takes Bertie on a tour, but Bertie has to pick up Dowager Hat and her friends. Bertie the bus is back. Thank God. I'm so glad to see classic era characters coming back in this season. Granted, Trevor was a cameo. Butch does count as a classic era character because he made his debut in season 5, and now we have Bertie. And he's in an episode that's actually quite good. Kind of reminded me of Thomas and Scarloway's Big Day Out from the Hit era, but replaced Scarloway with Bertie. It was quite suspenseful when Bertie came off the flatbed and was on the Shake Shake Bridge, but because I've seen so many engines cross that without any worries, the suspense was quickly taken out of it. We also had our first signs that the Fat Controller is actually terrified of his mother. And speaking of Dowager Hat, I do like how she remembered going to Misty Island from the previous season and actually referenced the episode by saying what jitters and japes. Nice bit of continuity. There hasn't been a lot of that. And of course, Harold was in a scene with Bertie as well when he's lifting him off the bridge. So 2 classic era characters for the price of 1. Number 4, James to the Rescue. Written by Shannon Miller, James refuses to work with Toby as the rescue engine, but soon regrets his decision. I like James as the rescue engine in this episode. It makes sense because saving people is a very heroic thing. James always thinks he's a hero, and in turn, his ego makes him out to be an utter ballbag. And he shows this when Toby turns up and he completely degrades him in front of all the other engines. A lot of people don't like that, but it felt very season 1 and season 3-esque with their dynamic in this episode. Only difference being that Toby was a lot more submissive. I know in the classic era episodes, he more stepped back and let James make a complete ass of himself, but there's a difference between taking a step back and watching it all unfold and him timidly trying to offer his help and then it all unfolding anyway. I don't like the rhyming speech on Gordon, but I really do prefer the rhyming speech on James because, again, it just makes him seem that more pompous and more prickish. It's something I think he would actually do. The Gordon and James crash was really good, and I have to admit, I had a good laugh at that. It's 2 grand engines getting totally shafted. Number 3, Happy Hero. Written by Shannon Miller, Hero is feeling homesick, so Thomas tries to cheer him up by taking him to Misty Island. I know I sound like a broken record here, but Togo Igawa is a fantastic voice actor, and he really elevates this episode. An episode which could be quite mediocre by other standards is brought up by the scale and gravitas of his performance. I know that Hero is missing Japan, but he had the opportunity to leave in Hero of the Rails, then they brought him back. So why did he come back if he was missing home? I know, because new engine, need to sell toys. But I'm meaning for the story-wise rather than the political background. Well, Thomas is a ball bag in this, because honestly, if he tried to take me to Misty Island, I would be even more depressed. But the quieter moments, where Thomas takes Hero to the parts of Misty Island that remind him of home, are so sweet. And those are the reasons why I really enjoyed this episode. Number 2, Henry's Happy Coal. Written by Sharon Miller, Ari and Bert tease Henry about using special coal. It's great to see Ari and Bert back in it and being complete pricks once again, which does lead to Henry not using his special coal and taking on normal coal until tea time. I did not expect to like this episode as much as I did, but I think the reason it resonated with me was on a deeper level. Henry needs this special coal because if he doesn't take it, he's not well. He feels insecure about taking it, but eventually realizes that he has to in order to make himself better and be the best that he can be. It resonated with me because of my own mental health issues. I have to take medication for my mental health, and a lot of the times I really don't like taking it. And when people find out that I take medication for my mental health, they make fun of me, saying that I need happy pills to function day to day. But I know that when I am off that medication, I'm not good. I struggle. I can't do the simplest of tasks. And it's taken me a long time to realize that there's nothing wrong with me needing happy pills. If it makes me the best version of myself that I can be, the best husband, the best father, the best person, who cares if I need it? And that was the message that drove home with me for Henry's happy coal. He has to take special coal to make him the best version of himself. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I also like that at the end, Ari and Bert are broken down and Henry has to push them to the diesel works to get fixed. Felt very Super Rescue-esque for the CGI era. And the number one episode of Thomas and Friends, season 15, is Spencer the Grand. Written by Jessica Sandys Clark, Spencer disobeys orders and tries to puff to the Duke and Duchess of Boxford's summer house in the fog. Spencer in a lead role, instant progress. It is quite ironic though, as Spencer is one of the grandest, most visually appealing engines, yet he's the lead role in an episode where you can barely see anything because of fog. But I think that's why I really enjoyed this episode. With the fog effects being used, you can't see a lot of things that are going on. So you really have to rely on the storytelling of the episodes. If this was an episode like Up and Away, it would have fallen flat in its face. It wouldn't have been good. But the storytelling was actually really strong. Another part that's quite ironic is because the fog totally takes away everything around you aside from Spencer. When you do see him in focus, you are instantly drawn to Spencer, and you do not let your gaze slip. There were great cameos from Mavis and Whiff, and I do find it funny that in trying to get to the Duke and Duchess's summer house, he winds up going all the way back to Tidmouth Sheds, where he didn't want to be in the first place. But what I really liked was the character development from Spencer. When he wound up back at Tidmouth Sheds, and they still offered him a berth to sleep in, he admitted that he didn't deserve their kindness. And then, when he realised the reason the berth was still there was because Percy wasn't back yet, he knew that Percy was in trouble. And without a moment's hesitation, went to go and find him. Would the Spencer from Hero of the Rails done that? Not a chance. He would have left him to die. But this episode played with his character and made you realise that, yes, Spencer is an ass, but he's one that you can't help but like. And actually, his steam engine equivalent of a heart is in the right place. A solid episode that did a lot with surprisingly very little. And that's my thoughts on Thomas and Friends season 15. Let me know in the comments how you would rank this season of Thomas and Friends. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.